Hello and welcome to another episode of Google's SEO Office Hours. In these videos, we aim to answer your questions about SEO and Google search. These questions were submitted using the form linked below over the past month. To answer them, we have folks from Google's search quality team. Joining us today are Dewey, Martin, Gary, and me, John. So, without further ado, let's dive right in.
Hi, this is Dewey from the search quality team. Colisio asked, if a domain gets penalized, does it affect the links that are outbound from it? I assume by penalized you mean that the domain was demoted by our spam algorithms or menu actions. In general, yes, we don't trust links from sites we know are spam. This helps us maintain the quality of our anchor signals.
Alan Edmonds is asking, are results in the URL inspection tool rendered HTML tab and rich results testing tool rendered HTML tab generated differently? Well, generally speaking, they are generated the same way. However, there are two ways these might be created. Using the indexing pipeline when using the view crawled page tab in Google Search Console, or using live test in Google Search Console or live test in rich results testing tool. The live tests both skip caching to provide a current glimpse into how the current version of the page will be rendered. So it is without caching, and without caching, timeouts can happen that will affect the rendered output. Depending on where these timeouts happen or if these timeouts happen, you might get different rendered HTML, but the way these are created are using the exact same paths through our infrastructure.
Hi, I'm usually Gary from the Search Relations team. Shanta is asking, is doing off-page SEO submissions to directories and social bookmarking sites worth it? Well, I like this question because it reminds me of the times when I was doing SEO like 15 years ago. In short, I wouldn't waste my time with directory submissions and social bookmarking. You're likely wasting your time on things that are not going to help at all.
Up next, why are collection pages excluded as no index on my site? So I took a look at the site that you mentioned to double check. In short, it's particularly the paginated category pages on your site, and they do have a no index robots meta tag. For things like this, I check the exact URL specified in Search Console. The short way to check is to open the page in a browser and to use view source, then search for robots to find the robots meta tag and Googlebot to find any Googlebot meta tags. Some pages may have multiple of these. In your case, I noticed you have two separate robots meta tags and the second one has the no index. In advanced cases, you'd want to use the mobile emulation in Chrome and use inspect element in developer tools to look at the loaded DOM or to use Search Console's inspect URL feature. In this particular case, I suspect it's a plugin or a setting in your site's e-commerce platform that does this, and maybe it's okay for you to keep it like this anyway.
Somebody asked, links to my site appear to be coming from Russian websites. How do I block these links? I believe they want to harm my site by making them lose ranking in search. Well, our algorithms generally do a very good job at recognizing and ignoring spammy or garbage links on the internet. In some cases, there can be a lot of them. You shouldn't really worry about them and just let our systems do their job and focus on improving your website.
Ezrak is asking, does the backend of a website matter for ranking? For example, does it matter if we are using WordPress or a custom-made CMS or any specific programming language to render HTML? No, it generally doesn't matter. However, the performance and behavior of it does though. For instance, if your server is particularly slow, then that can have some impact on ranking.
Madeleine asks, do you plan to allow more than one site name for snippets? For example, for the root domain and subdomains. In our documentation about site names, we mentioned that this is currently only for the domain name and not for subdomains. I can't promise future changes. With some changes, the team involved tends to start on one part of the problem, evaluate how it's going, and then expand from there. We really can't promise anything more future-looking, though.
Tom Baker is asking, should it take over 6 months to index my 16,000 pages? I see an increase of maybe 5 to 15 per week, and I find this slow. Well, how fast a site is indexed depends on a bunch of things, but the most important one is the quality of the sites followed by its popularity on the internet. Once you ensure that your content is the highest quality you can possibly make, try to run some social media promos perhaps, so you get people to start talking about your site. That will probably help a lot.
Michael asks, for permalinks, is it better with contractions to have will not versus won't in the URL? Won't actually has another meaning, but in general, is there a best practice for don't, like do not or don't? It doesn't matter. Generally speaking, words in URLs have a minimal effect in search. My only recommendation would be to be consistent, so that you don't accidentally link to the same page in different ways. Also, since the effect is minimal, and since changing URLs across a site is a pretty big change, I would not or wouldn't recommend changing a site's URLs only for a vague SEO promise that you might have read somewhere.
Eamon is asking, does it make it hard for Googlebots to crawl and index an image if it is having many levels in the image URL? For instance, example.com/a/b/cd/de/content/content1/s2 and so on and so forth .jpg. Well, good news is, no, it doesn't.
Anonymous is asking, a lot of spam backlinks point to my website. How to stop them? Well, easy. You ignore them. The internet is a huge place and you likely get links which are from its not so nice corners, especially if you have a bigger site. We've been dealing with such links for 25 years maybe, and we've gotten pretty good at ignoring them. So I just ignore them. If they really bother you, you can use the disavow tool in Search Console.
Alexis asks, is it possible that Google Search Console shows me wrong queries? Performance data in Search Console is collected when your site is shown for specific queries. The data is not theoretical, it's based on what was shown to users when they searched. When I see data there that I don't understand, I try to narrow the report settings down to find the specifics. Was it only in a certain country, or perhaps a certain search type? Was it perhaps in a very short window of time? Sometimes it's possible to reproduce the search results shown given these specifics, but it can also be something that either isn't shown anymore or that is only visible from time to time. Sometimes these are fun puzzles, and sometimes you just have to accept that you currently can't reproduce it.
Madeleine is asking, we deliver the full HTML of a page via server-side rendering, SSR, for all search engine bots and use client-side rendering for the user. Is this a suitable solution in terms of JavaScript SEO? That's an approach we would call dynamic rendering. In general, it adds complexity to your setup and maintenance efforts. But if it works for you, it's fine to do it. We don't encourage it for new projects because of the complexity cost it adds on the side of website owners too. So it's not an optimal solution, but if it works, I don't see a reason to change it.
All G is asking, how important are descriptive file names for images? This is a good question, pretty close to my heart. They are generally helpful a little, but if you have many images, say millions, at one point you will have to consider whether that benefit is worth it, worth the work. If you just have a few images here and there, yeah, have good file names, but you probably shouldn't bother once you have a truckload of them.
Next up is, what's the best way to get your traffic up after a redesign? There are a lot of different ways to do redesigns. Some sites are essentially completely new after a redesign, with new URLs, completely new page structures, and everything. In cases like that, you'd need to treat it more like a site move and include redirects. Otherwise, you might see an immediate drop after relaunching. In your case, when I looked at your site, It looks like the decline is more slowly over time. To me, that suggests that the redesign isn't primarily the issue, but rather that search, the web, or users have changed their behavior or expectations over time. That's usually less of a technical issue and more about understanding the world around your site and working to improve your site to match. And that's not always easy. Sorry.
Jason is asking, does Googlebot for organic search crawling render every page crawled? If not, how often does this happen? The answer to that is yes and no. Not every page we crawl gets rendered. For example, a crawl that leads to a 404 error page won't get rendered. Every page that is fine when we crawl it does get rendered.
Matthias is asking, can it hurt to have schema markup on a page that is invalid? Say, product markup without offer, review, aggregate rating. The short answer is no. The long answer is also no, because if we can't parse the schema, we just won't use it. That might mean that you are going to miss out on some search features like rich attributes under your snippets though, so maybe you care about that.
Hazim asks how to change from a redirect 302 to a redirect 301. This is something you'd have to look at with your site's hoster or domain registrar. However, the good news is that Google Search does recognize long-standing temporary redirects as permanent ones. So this isn't something that's critical for your site at the moment. It's good to use the theoretically correct redirect, but Search tries to work with whatever you have too, as long as it is a redirect.
Anan is asking, hi, does extensive boilerplate content harm the website? I'm not referring to contact info, privacy policy, and etc. Thanks. Generally, no. Extensive boilerplate should not have much of an effect on your website's presence in search. That said, you might want to think about how users perceive that extensive boilerplate. There's a chance they might not like it at all.
Matthew is asking, how do I prevent Googlebot from calling an expensive external API when rendering the JavaScript on a page? You can use Robots.txt to disallow crawling of the URL. But beware, if you use client-side rendering and the content on the page depends on these APIs, then Googlebot needs to access the API to see the content. Otherwise, your pages would not have that content when Googlebot looks at them. For external third-party URLs, where you cannot use Robots.txt to disallow access, you could conditionally load these APIs in your JavaScript and skip it when Googlebot requests the page.
D-Ray from Muse is asking, is there any certain method to change domain names without actually losing SEO rankings? Well, a well-executed site move, which includes domain changes, shouldn't result in a lasting traffic loss. So yeah, there is a method to change domain name without losing rankings. Check out our documentation about site moves. We've also linked to other expertly crafted guides from other experts.
Josh asks, my brand favicon was uploaded over a month ago. However, on Google, my webflow favicon is still there. Do you know how to resolve this so it's my brand one that I uploaded previously? We have help documentation about favicons. I would go through that and check the details there. I would also make sure that the old favicon is both no longer on or linked from your site, and ideally that you redirect the old file to the new one. In short, make sure that everything is consistent and that there is no room for misinterpretation by search engines. Past that, sometimes these changes take a while to be visible. A month should be enough, but if you find other things to fix, I'd give it a bit more time to catch up. And finally, outside of Google, Glenn Gabe has put together a fantastic guide on troubleshooting favicon issues. You might find some tips there.
V is asking, what if a website writes posts in multiple languages, translated by hand? What is the best practice to divide the content? Well, that's really up to you. Whether you use URL parameters like our help center, say HL equals JA, or you put the language code in the URL path, it doesn't matter from a search perspective. Just make sure that you have a unique URL for every language version.
Mikhail asks, does Google accept links such as, and this is an HTML markup, select option value equals https example.com for a page? Is that something that works? We would not treat this as a link, but we might recognize the URL and crawl it separately. If you want something to be treated like a link, then you should make sure that it's a normal link. We recently published guidelines on making links, so if your web developer has questions about what's supported, I'd send them there. As an aside, this combination of HTML wouldn't necessarily work as a link in the browser either. It could be used as a dropdown for a form instead.
Aslam Khan is asking, well, actually stating, Robots.txt unreachable in Google Search Console. If Search Console is reporting unreachable Robots.txt issue with your property, your site or server has an issue, and you'll have to fix it if you want to see your site in Google Search. There's nothing we can do about this on our side, really. The first thing I check is the firewall rules for your server. If there's anything weird going on in the blocking rules, for example, then move on to the server configuration files and see if there's anything weird there. If you don't know how to do this yourself, open a support ticket with your hosting provider and they can likely help you.
Carlos asks, if a sitemap has hreflang URLs mentioned, how do properties like lastmod or priority affect it? When the hreflang annotations are specified in a sitemap file, you're essentially referring to those other URLs. This needs to be confirmed on all URLs of the hreflang set. However, understanding when to crawl a URL is different. For crawling, among other things, we look at the attributes for that specific URL. For example, its last modification date. It can happen, for example, that one language version changes independently, perhaps due to translation fixes. That said, even the last modification date is just a very rough signal among many signals. It does not guarantee that a page will be recrawled soon. Also worth noting, crawling more does not mean that a page ranks better. So you don't need to try to force a higher crawl frequency.
Nick van Schaik is asking, should I block affiliate links in Robots.txt to manage crawl budget, or lift, disavow, and prevent affiliate links from being indexed by using noindex tag? Blocking affiliate links in Robots.txt seems sensible, although we are pretty good at recognizing and ignoring them ourselves. With Robots.txt disallow, this is confusing, you're in control and you might indeed save some crawl budget much easier.
And that was it for this episode. I hope you found the questions and answers useful. If there's anything you submitted which didn't get covered here, I'd recommend posting in the Search Central help community. There are lots of passionate experts active there who can help you to narrow things down. And of course, if there's more on your mind, please submit those questions with a form linked below. Your questions here are helpful to us and to those who catch up on these recordings, so please keep them coming. If you have general feedback about these episodes, let us know in the comments or ping us on social media. In the meantime, may your site's traffic go up and your crawl errors go down. Thank you and goodbye.